These are not deserted cities that you're walking into. There's people here, but it's going to be yours. All of this is yours. I'm going to be with you. I'll even go before you. You still have to follow my commandments. The first hurdle that they came to as we, and some of this was from the chapter previous to this, some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about here was in chapter 5. I'm not going to go back and read all that. But their first hurdle is the formidable city of Jericho. It was a fortress. So why was it considered a fortress? Anybody know anything about Jericho? Had a wall all the way around it, right? So I'm going to read verses 2 and 3 again, and this is God talking to Joshua about what's going to happen, right? This is what I'm going to do. He says, "And the Lord said unto Joshua, See, I have given unto thine hand Jericho," this great city. This is the first place they come to, that they got to do something here. "And the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor. And ye shall compass the city, all ye men of war, and go round about the city once. Thus shall do 6 days," right? So this city, the people of Jericho, it's kind of hard to hide a nation of people that's come across the Jordan River, come into your land, and you're not sneaking up on anybody, right? So it's not like the people that lived in Jericho did not know they were coming. There's an army coming toward our city. So they relied on their stronghold, their walled city. They closed up the gates, and in the chapter before this, it said no one was going in, no one was going out. They have circled the wagons, right? Here comes these Israelites. We got to do something. So it's all shut up and all this. But God had already promised them victory, had he not? You go do this, it's going to be yours. I have put this in your hand. That's God saying, here, it's going to be yours. But you got to do this. He's telling them, you have to do something. This is the way God's covenants work. I'll do this, but you have to do this. Or if you don't keep your end of the bargain, the covenant is broken, right? It's like a broken contract, however you want to think of it. God's instructions seem a little strange, though, don't they? For 6 days, take your soldiers, and there's more. We'll talk about it in a minute. You're going to walk around the city. You can't make a sound. Nobody talk. And that was from chapter 5. He's talking this. Don't make a sound. I don't want anybody talking. There's going to be no shouting. You're just going to walk around the city. Just really quiet. Once. Come back to your camp. That's it. 6 days. That's a little bizarre, isn't it? How hard do you think it was for Joshua to receive these instructions? Say, all right, God, we're on that. Would we be a little dubious maybe? Well, that seems a little strange. How am I going to win a battle for 6 days in a row? I got to set up camp. We're outside the city walls, and I'm going to walk around one time. Don't make a sound. Come back to camp, and we'll do it again tomorrow, right? A little bizarre.
We want what we want when we want it.
Yeah, that's right. And you know what? Do we understand all of God's commandments to us? No. What's our obligation, though? To follow, to obey what he said. If God told me to do it, we all say, I trust in the Lord. I rely on the Lord. But when we question what he would have us do, are you really trusting? Are we trusting like we should? Because there's all kinds of stuff that's wrapped up in this whole battle that goes on here. First is, God has instructions for us. It's our duty to follow those instructions, right? That's called obedience. If we don't follow what God would have us do, it is disobedience, which is sin. We can't do that. We have to follow God's rules. All right, I'm going to look at verses 4 and 5 together. He says, "And 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of ram's horns, and the 7th day you shall compass the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow with the trumpets. And it shall come to pass that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people will shout with a great shout." Now they can make noise. And the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall ascend up, every man straight before him. So along with the soldiers walking once a day around the city walls, and I know this is a very familiar story to most of you in here, you're also going to have 7 priests carrying or bearing the Ark of the Covenant, right? There's also they're going to be carrying 7 trumpets of ram's horns. And notice 7 all throughout this little passage here. And on the 7th day, you're going to make 7 trips around the city. And after you've made that 7th trip around the city, the priest will blow the horns. One loud blast, right? And when those priests sound the trumpets, a long loud blast, all the people will give a great shout, and those walls are going to fall flat. Seriously, God? That's what's going to happen? That's all we're going to do is walk around the city, and we're going to blow the horn, and the walls, and we're going to shout. We're going to make noise now after doing this is our 7th day of doing this. We're going to do it 7 times. We're going to blow 7 trumpets, and then we're all going to hoop and holler, and the walls are going to fall. This great city that's so fortified, nobody's coming in, no open doors, and the walls are going to fall down? Nah. I mean, seriously, would we not? I mean, that would be our reaction. I'm not going to follow that. That's the silliest thing I've ever heard. Why all this? Why do you think so let's think about this a minute. God's instructions were very specific. Every detail. This is what you're going to do. And if you do this, then this is what's going to happen. Why? Why all this detail? You know, and again, there's so many things we could take from that as well. When we choose to follow the Lord, doesn't some reinforcement do us a lot of good? You know, when we see answered prayers, when we see miracles, when we feel God's touch, doesn't that really boost our faith and make us a little bit stronger for the next battle or the next whatever we have coming on? It's no different for these people. You know, they needed to know, they needed to see, this is God working. This is not our hands that did it. They obviously knew that blowing horns and shouting and walking around the outside of a city are not going to make these walls fall down, right? God knew they needed to see that they could rely on Him, trust in Him, if they obeyed His commandments. If God says, if you will do this, I will do this, they needed to see that, right? So this is a simple test. It's not like He told them to go out and make some kind of sacrifice that was going to be some meaningful thing to them, or you got to give up this, you got to chop off your left foot, or, you know, whatever the case is. Nothing strenuous, nothing hard to do, but there was some action that was required on their part. They had to do these. Do you think that if they had not followed God's instructions, just exactly as He laid them out, do you think those city walls would have fallen? I don't think so either. I think it was imperative for them to follow no matter how strange it sounded. Yeah, this is not going to happen. There's no way. That's impossible. They needed to see the impossible. They needed to see that with God it could be done. So if they did as God said, then He would do as He said, right? Pretty simple. Don't we learn that way? Doesn't our faith grow that way? They also needed to know that this was God's hand that was making victory possible, not their own. God had already promised to both Moses and to Joshua, when the reins were handed over to Joshua, don't be afraid, be of good courage, be strong. I will be with you. I will go before you. I will never forsake you. He said that over and over in the first part of this book and the end of Exodus, when he was everything was shifting from Moses to Joshua. They needed to know that. We should all understand, us, all these thousands of years later, that being obedient to even the little things of God, do not spread rumors, do not tell fibs, it's important to God, right? So that makes it important for us. If it was important enough for God to tell us, don't do this, whether it's committing murder, telling a little white lie, whatever you want to call it, if God said don't do it, if it was important enough for him to tell us not to do these things, it should be important for us too, right? We should place some importance on that. And we should say, okay, God, if that's what you tell me to do, that's what I'm going to do, right?